Hi folks, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast by Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. In this podcast, Gary shares everything about servant leadership, service leadership, authentic leadership, how to create high performance cultures, service excellence and life balance. Here's your host, Gary Ryan.
Thank you, Sienna, for your kind introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with George Harrak, currently the Chief Information Officer at Hilal Bank in Dubai at the United Arab Emirates. And I'm absolutely delighted to have this chat with George tonight. George has got a fascinating career. He actually moved from Australia to Singapore when working for DBS, a digital bank, in 2014. Took his whole family there. He's effectively been overseas ever since. He won an international award. The Digibank Technology won the Euro Money's World Best Digital Bank in 2016, which was the first ever Asian bank to do so, which is an extraordinary experience given we take digital banks for granted today. But if you wind back 7 years, they weren't as popular or as common as they are today. So that's a fascinating story to hear from George. He also worked for Standard Chartered Bank as well, one of the world's most incredible banks, starting out with a computer science degree, an amazing career journey. George, welcome aboard. It's great to chat with you today.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me, and real privilege to be part of this podcast. And when you first invited me, and maybe I should just add this, I looked at the list of people you've had on it previously, and I'm thinking, geez, I'm not that interesting, so I've got a lot to live up to.
Well, you might not think you're interesting. I think that's one of the things that you've always had since I met you in 1995, was when we first met, back in the days in Melbourne, Australia. And you've always, in my view, you've always been a strong character, a strong leader, but always a very humble human being. And the way your career's gone, and even just chatting away this evening before we started the interview, just how humble you are. I'm going to try and draw some of that spark out of you. That's not, try and help people get inspired through some of the activities that you've done. So one of the things I am interested in is Dubai is a fascinating city. What's one of the magical things you and your family have discovered about living in Dubai?
Yeah, you're right, Gaz. Look, it is a magical city, and one of the things that I often tell people think Dubai is just desert. And what people don't realise is that when you get here, it's just so much more than that. So, there are mountain ranges, there are amazing beaches here. I mean, when I say beaches, crystal clear, and it's underlined with the infrastructure that they've got around it. So the infrastructure of this place is just A1 phenomenal. And maybe just give you some sense. It's probably one of the first places in the world where I've ever worked where the government services and the infrastructure the government puts together is more digitised than the private sector, and that just goes to show you how much the government here are investing in the landscape, the economy. They're looking at doubling Dubai's population, currently sitting about 3.6, but in 20 years they're looking at doubling it. It's amazing what they're doing over here, but yeah, it's just phenomenal in terms of the situation, the position it is in part of the world where you've got so many different people from all around the world coming here to work and make a living.
So there must be significant opportunities with that potential to go from 3.6 million people to 7.2 million people, plus the fact it's a bank, so it's in the global economy anyway. There must be significant opportunity in Dubai.
Oh, look, there is, and I think one of the things that's happening over here now is that during that whole COVID period, a lot of the countries we've seen, in particular, obviously Australia, were locked down. The UAE took the opposite approach. Whilst there was still some restrictions in place, they were a little bit more open to people still coming through, bringing their work here, and they took it as an opportunity because they saw parts of Asia like China and Hong Kong and even Singapore, where I was at the time, locking down. So they thought, look, let's open up and see what we can do to bring a lot of the business here. So they've really jumped on that, and as we've seen the growth, so just in the last year they've had 100,000 people move to Dubai. Just 100,000 in 1 year, which is amazing. And, we've seen that growth. It's been phenomenal.
And from a scale point of view, just for particularly folk that might be tuning in from Australia for this, like how big is Al Hilal Bank? And then I'd like to get to how did that opportunity come for you, given you came during COVID?
Yeah, look, Al Hilal Bank's a small bank here, but I'll just maybe explain a little bit of its history because I think it just puts it into context. So, in 2019, so Al Hilal was born back in 2008, but in 2019 it got acquired by one of the largest banks here called ADCB, which is Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, which is our group, our parent bank. At
Yes.
that point in time, so Al Hilal is a fully fledged Islamic Sharia compliant bank, and the view then was that through the acquisition, what ADCB wanted to do was to make this bank the first digital Islamic bank in the region. So rather than just keep it out on its own and stick to the sort of conventional banking ways of operating, they wanted to transform it and strategically bring that into the realms of a digital bank. So when I was given the opportunity to come over here, and the project that was put in front of me was amazing. So maybe a little bit about it. So we effectively launched in February. It was actually the second of the 22nd. So it was a significant day for us. We could have launched well before that, but I think we wanted to make it memorable. So we were ready within a 6 month period. We built the bank within 6 months. We went out to family and friends, so we really just tested the platform and tested all the processes and procedures around us, and got all the relevant approvals and all those sorts of things. And then we launched that specific day. And it's been an amazing, honestly, an amazing journey, because if you look at the proposition of what we've built, and how it sort of resonates with our brand, that's probably the most proud part of what we've been able to do. So, today, just to give you some sense, well over 50% of our customers are Emirati locals here. Through our application, we've built what we call a family proposition. So we've been able to set up accounts, obviously for parents, but also youth and children. And we've brought that all together under what we call the family nucleus. So when you first sign up to our application, where effectively it's fully digital, you can onboard immediately within a couple of minutes. You're able then to open up a bank account for your child. And just to tell you the power of this, one of the proudest things, and one of the things that caught us by surprise, was the power of kids' ability to have an account and then be able to show their friends, which then just raised the level of tension, wanting people to come and join us. So we had a number of children going to school. They've got their Al Hilal debit cards showing off, and then all of a sudden it became a bit of a trend. But what we've been able to do through that is we've built, for example, gamification and a game where we can educate children, around the use of money. So we have a game there where a child can be set a number of chores. If they complete those chores, they'll be rewarded with points. Through points, they're able then to jump onto a marketplace, which we have in the application. They can purchase some items and gifts like gift vouchers, certain products related to children, and so forth. So it's just an amazing proposition, and we're pretty proud of what we've done. And just to give you some sense, and it's a little bit of it's a 360-degree turn. We had ANZ come down here. I used to work for ANZ when I was back in Melbourne.
Yes.
And they came to have a look at, some of their senior folks came to have a look at what we've built, and they were just absolutely blown away. And they were like, can we do something like this, down in Oz? So it was a little bit of it was a nice and sort of proud moment, especially being the home country coming in to visit us to see what we've done at that point of time. So, yeah.
And this is where I want to break through the humility, George. You led this. You've led the creation of this. I know you've had a team of people, but you obviously had to recruit your team. I know you talk about how important recruitment is and how that's a really one of your superpowers, if you like, skills of being able to recruit the right people. But to pull a team together, to go through that strategic process and say, how are we going to win in this game? What are our strategies? Well, we're going to use that whole family model, which was obviously untested before you did it. Then you've gone and implemented it. It sounds like it's actually worked better than you could have even imagined. But along the way, you've obviously even continued to build on your platform, gamify it as you've suggested. You went viral in the Emirati schools, obviously, with the kids taking their cards to to school, and then what other kids wanting to do the same thing. And the other thing that you shared there, George, which I think is missing in a lot of society these days, is you talked about how you're educating the young children around finance. And that's the fact that we don't have cash really anymore. I mean, large parts of our economies are just completely cashless. How do children know what the value of a dollar is if there isn't some way of them being connected with finance? Importantly, as you're doing from quite a young age. And I'd be interested in how did some of those strategies come about? How did that all happen, George?
Yeah, look, I'd love to take some credit for this one, Gary. But look, I've got a great boss. My CEO, he's a visionary, and when he thinks about, he's lived here. Just to give you some background, he's of Indian descent, but he's been living in Dubai now for well over 40 years. So pretty much he came here as a kid and went to school here. So he really understands the values and the traditions of this place, first and foremost. The second part is that, he's a very strong retail banker, and he's seen the evolution of retail banking. And maybe just to give you, and sorry not to go into an in-depth lesson around retail banking, but it has evolved so much. To your point before around we're all becoming digital now, where 10 years ago, when I was working for DBS, we conducted analysis. We built, one of the first digital banks in India back then. And just to give you some sense, we had all these studies to say, look, as digital as you want to go, we still need to have bricks and mortar. So, we still want to have the ability to have a branch, to be able to walk in and to be able to, provide services through a branch and still have that physical touch. Now the landscape's changed. All around the world, I can name you a number of digital banks that have been born, have formed, and that have been successful because of people, and so the next generation are a lot more open to sort of the digital way of working. So he's seen that and said, okay, how can I take that, but also looking at our brand and looking at the culture and the way we live here in the UAE, how do I bring that all together? So, if you go onto our application today, it's predominantly a super app. You can pay bills, you can buy goods, services, groceries, all those sorts of things. So it's like an all-in-one encompassing, but it's really based around the whole family etiquette. And what I love most about it is that we are Sharia compliant. So you have to stay to those values. So all those values undermine what we do today. And I think he's been the visionary. I'm the guy that just came to help him build it, so to speak. But just going back to your question around recruitment, I think this is a really important one. So I've been blessed, Gary, in my career, especially over the last 10-year period, where I've worked with some really strong individuals. And, I've been able to bring a number of those individuals with me, whether I was at DBS, whether I've been at Standard Chartered, now at Hilal Bank. But the other thing, the great thing, and this is, I don't know if it's fortune here, but when I joined Hilal, there was a view that we've still had a number of people that had been in the bank since its inception in 2008, and that weren't willing to change. And I went in with the mindset of, look, I want to give people the opportunity. Let's see how we go. And it was just amazing, like a mixture of new individuals coming and have done this before versus individuals that were really attached to the brand and wanting to learn. And a mixture of that, I'll tell you that the ability to change was enormous. And I remember sitting the first meeting I had with my direct reports. They were bleary-eyed. I had 8 of them in front of me, and I said to them, "Look, it's going to be a hard road. Having done this a few times now, it's going to be a hard road. But I can promise you now, whether you like it or not, some of you aren't going to be here in another year's time after we build this thing, because you're going to be poached. You're going to be considered hot talent, and because there are a number of banks that want to do this." And lo and behold, I lost at least 4 of those direct reports within the space of the year after going live. And look, credit to them. And you can't hold people back. This is part of their evolution. So yeah.
And so you've obviously had to embrace that you are at the bow wave end of part of the journey here. You're at the front end. You've had success over time with DBS. You've created. In Dubai, the new digital bank at Al Hilal, and you've obviously had talent come along, and as you said, people wanting to poach that, so they poach it out, and you got to replace it again, and that's just part of the territory. So there's a degree of calmness needs to come with that, George, for you to be able to be okay in that environment, and know, hey, I'm going to develop you. You're going to do hard work, but you're going to get poached, and for you to be okay with that is a critical skill.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And look, the reality is, Gary, is, as much as we love the organisations that we work for, some do, some don't. But, at the end of the day, we're here to come in and serve a job. And long after we'll leave, the organisation, in most cases, will still be running. There'll be new people coming in with different ideas, different thoughts, and different approaches and ways of doing things. So, my view around all this is that, look, whilst you're here and the time that you're here, let's make the most of it. One, if you can leave here and saying, look, I've learned something or I've taken something out of this organisation, that to me is winning at the end of the day. Because, we spend close to 80% of our lives in our jobs today, in most cases. So to be able to work somewhere where you're enjoying yourself, but also you're learning a lot, to me is probably the most important thing when I look at sort of the roles that I take on. Yeah.
As you know, folks, the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast is proudly brought to you by Organisations That Matter. Here's a short message from our founder, Gary Ryan. Tonight I've got a gig on that starts at 5 p.m. through to 8 p.m. I've been up since 5 a.m. The reality is in life we need to have energy for action. We've got to understand how our energy works, because some days you've got to have a long day. You also need to have plenty of energy for your relationships, if you're a parent, for your wife, for your children, for your best friends. You've got to have energy for the physical things that you want to do in your life. We need energy for action. That's the beauty of my book, Energy for Success. In 7 steps, my book will walk you through exactly what you need to do to identify the natural way to have energy for everything you need in your life. It's for the price of a coffee, $4.99 Australian. Seriously, it's the cheapest way to find out and work out for yourself, how do I make sure that I naturally have the energy that I need for all the things that I want to do successfully in my life. Check it out. Thanks for that message. Now let's return to our interview with George Harrak. Yeah, so in addition to learning, what are some of the other key leadership attributes that you think that you've really brought to the business, and that you have been evolving obviously over time as you've been learning, but that right now you're fairly clear these are really important? So maybe the top 3 leadership attributes for you, George.
Yeah, look. First and foremost, for me, and you won't be surprised at this, because I think a lot of this comes from you. You probably don't want to take a lot of credit for it, but I've been blessed with having some really good mentors and individuals that I've sort of had sort of come in and out of my life. From my parents who are extremely hardworking. I God bless them. To this day, I don't know how they sort of brought us up in the environment they did. And, from waking up, my parents in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, to coming home at 11 at night, that work ethic for me is just instilled. And so I'm really fortunate to I can give you a little bit of kudos here, but to having someone like yourself, for example, who has had influence on my life. I saw you come into a football club that was, at that time, happy to just be humming along, not really having any ambition or any values or anything like that, to putting a lot of the principles, the what we stand for, and then bring that team together. And I saw that happen, in the space around 4 or 5 years. And I've learned a lot from that, Gary. You may not know the impact that you've had, but I can tell you, for me, that's been a significant impact, because what I've seen someone that can come in and actually change an organisation, whether it be a football team or a company or a corporate. You've been able to do that. So for me, that attribute of bringing, looking at people's strengths and weaknesses, bringing that togetherness to put together a view of, let's have one common vision, one goal. And look, it's not difficult from my perspective, Gary. And the main reason is that, look, we've got a bank to build, guys. It's plain and simple. We've got a bank to build. How are we going to do this collectively? Everyone's going to play a role. We're all going to play a role, whether you're a developer, whether you're a designer. We all got to roll our sleeves up, and we all got to get on with it. So you start to create that startup culture wherever you work, that team environment. So I think that team environment has come through as well. And then Look, the last thing for me is, and I think you hit it on the head as well, that humility. I mean, for me, it's being humble, being appreciative of what you've got, and where you are. And I think it's really important, regardless of where you sit in an organisation. At the end of the day, it's not hard to smile at someone. It's not hard to to give kudos to someone that's done something. Whether it be small, because you can have a massive impact on them, and I've seen it. I was working at Stan, just to give you some sense. I was working at Stan Chart, and it was a difficult job, and I'll just explain why. I had close to 1,000 developers globally that I'm managing, and it was really difficult to get out there and speak to them all. And I like to be personable. I like to get on the ground. I like to speak to people, and I found that really tough. And one of the things I've sort of realised now in my own mind now is that I'm actually, I enjoy working for a smaller organisation because you can have that personal touch. And I think that makes a massive difference. So hopefully I answer your question.
Yeah, well, you did. So you spoke about work ethic that clearly came from your parents. I mean, people underestimate, I think, in our modern world, George, the importance of work ethic and this idea of 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of sleep. Sorry, no one is successful who lives by that motto. Like, they just don't. And if you can be working in an area that you really, really want that vision and that goal that you said, you didn't say values in this answer, but you said it earlier, that there's clear values. You've mentioned it numerous times with Al Hilal that you've got very clear values that you believe in and you support, and that helps you with that family basis. You spoke about understanding people's strengths and weaknesses and using that, and also about humility and recognizing people and just saying thank you and that personal touch, which is one of the reasons why you are now. Like there's significant leadership attributes, and you mentioned that time when I was the football coach. You might not be aware, but that was just as valuable for me. That was just as valuable for me because I was only 27, and what you might not even know this, George, but at the time I was a manager at Monash, and in that first year I wasn't doing initially what I was doing at the football club in my day job. And then I tested my mentor. I said, why aren't I doing this at work? Like, this is crazy. I should be doing this at work. Because I could see the immediate value of what it was having impact at the football club. And so that shifting and broadening my own mindset and applying that has made a massive difference in my life. It's made a massive difference to me as a parent of our 5 children, which then takes me to what I'd like to explore with you next is 2014. You pick up your family and you move to Singapore. Right, you become a global employee as a result. That's a courageous move. Like, how did that come about? And how did you convince the family, hey, this is what we're doing?
Yeah, well, look, initially, Gary, I came up by myself because it was to really see what it was like to live as an expat and really to try something different. I've always had ambition to leave Australia in one way or another to try something different because I've a lot of people in my life that have done it themselves, and that I was connected to back home that sort of went overseas and expats, and I saw how they came back in terms of their thinking, their mindset, their ways of living. It was something that I've always strived for. So I had an opportunity, and I had a really good friend, colleague of mine, David Walker, he's now the CTO of Westpac. He was in Singapore at the time, and I had worked with him at ANZ as colleagues. And he gave me a call and he told me, look, DBS are in the business of potentially building a digital bank. Why don't you come up here and see how you go? So I took the opportunity, and initially I only came on board as a contractor, so I wasn't a full-time employee because at that stage the program was still forming, and there was still some views around which target market they wanted to go through. Was there an investment or an appetite to do this? So there was still lots of moving parts during that period. So, but on there, from that perspective, there was really 2 hard years of working alone up in Singapore at the time. To build the bank, and in one way, there were probably about 4 or 5 times where I packed my bags. Honestly, I was ready to go home, thinking, "What am I doing here?" But I had to persist. I didn't want to come home and say, people, in my mind anyway, people say, George, he's come back, he's a failure or anything along those lines. I had to give it a go regardless. And again, going back to, your parents, that was one thing that they instilled with me. Look, it doesn't matter what you do. Don't die wondering. Make sure that whatever you do at the end of the day, you do it 100%. And if it doesn't work out, then, it's an experience in your life. So, we got to the end of the second year, and the bank just went gung ho. And we launched in India. Just to give you some perspective, in the first year we had 1 million new customers, on board. We had a massive launch party in Mumbai where we had Sachin Tendulkar as our ambassador, and it was just the amount of experience I had during that period was just phenomenal. So at that point, we had to make a decision with the family. And I think we just couldn't live apart anymore. So, watching my three children, God bless them, growing up, it was difficult 2 years to be away with them. So they decided to come up, and we still sometimes look at the photos. But I remember their first day at school, at the international school in Singapore, and we see how small they were then, and how tall they are, and how much they've grown now. It's phenomenal. But I'm just so. I'm just so appreciative of the experience, and fortunate, and I keep saying fortunate because, a lot of things had to go right for me to get up there at that particular point of time. And I was just blessed that I had some really good people around me at that point.
Yeah, and since then, obviously in 21, there was the move to Dubai, and your children are, in their teenage years by this stage. And I think, how old's your oldest child now?
I've got a 21-year-old. Jess is 21, and she's just graduated from Melbourne University, and she's working now here in Dubai as well. So yeah, time flies.
Congratulations!
Thank you, mate.
That's a proud dad moment, isn't it? And so I mean, the strength of your children and your wife to support you and to be that family, and to have their international experience, and to be true global citizens. I mean, people hear this, but you are one. Your family are global citizens with the choices that you've made. And I assume while you were in Singapore for those first couple of years, it was a fly in, fly out scenario as much as you could to be able to get home and visit the family. But that's still, that's a tough gig, and it's a dedication. It's also about having clear goals and having everyone on the same page with those goals when you're in a family. This is one of the things I try to teach people, is that whatever your goals are, you've got to get your family on board.
Yeah.
You got to get. They've got to understand how this is going to benefit them, so that you can move forward and collectively get the benefits from it. So was your daughter able to study here in Melbourne, or was that actually via online, given the COVID situation for some of that time as well?
Yeah, most of it was online. So it was it was a little bit unfortunate because she never really got that full-blown university experience. So she had just started her degree. She did a Bachelor of Commerce at Melbourne, and she was literally starting, I think, within the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then COVID hit. And then we had to make a choice. I remember calling her at the day because they had shut one of the buildings at the campus, and she said, "Oh, Dad, I'm coming home." She said, "I'm coming." Going back home for her was her grandparents' place. She was staying there because they live close to Melbourne University. And then I said to her, "Look, it's going to get bad. Why don't you just come up here, and then we'll see the lay of the land. Because if they shut the borders, we're not going to see you for some time." So thank God we made the call at that point of time. So that night, pretty much, she jumped on a plane and came to Singapore. And then for the next, two odd years, she was with us. The good thing was that as COVID sort of tapered off, she did her last 6 months back at Melbourne, and at least she got some of that experience. But you talk about kids, the resiliency of kids, and to me it still amazes me. And not just my children. I think in general, sometimes we underestimate how resilient our children can be. And I'm sure you're in the same boat, Gary. I remember when we were talking about moving to Singapore. They're the ones that drove us. My wife was a little bit reluctant at the time. Very much in the realms of being around family and other things. But my kids were like, "No, this is an experience." And I had to take my daughter, my oldest. She was in year 7 at the time, so she had to leave year 7, her first year at Avila College there, and move up here. And I remember the first day going to work when she was having her first day at school. And, I was on tenterhooks because I just didn't know the reaction. And the best thing I got ever was that we had a WhatsApp group at the time, and she'd taken a photo and she had about 20 students behind her. And she said to us, I think I'm going to be okay. And that was her exact thing. And to me, that just hit me. It hit me pretty hard because I was so happy, because the last thing I wanted to do was actually bring them in here and then not, enjoy themselves, or, at least change their lives in a negative way. And that's just been complete opposite.
You just gave me goosebumps, George. What a leader. What a leader she. I mean, she's led you then, right? Your children led you. That's got to make you proud. I mean, look, that's the upbringing, that's the values, that's again, the children being on the same page and having conversations with them so they're in the loop and understanding. I mean, last thing I want to chat to you about, given that your time is extremely valuable with your role, of course, is the networking that you did. So you spoke earlier about ambition. You always had ambition, and you knew people that had gone overseas and worked. So for you, it was like, this is going to happen. But without being corny about it, you obviously had been cultivating very deliberate relationships with key people and performing along the way so that you could get that tap on the shoulder and say, hey, George, this is opportunity in Singapore. Do you want to come and give it a go? And because of your clarity, you were able to go, I'm happy to do that as a contractor to start with and see where it lands. Right? So what can you tell us and tell the audience a little bit about your approach to networking and some of the key attributes of that have worked for you over the journey, George?
Yeah, look, I can't push the point enough about continuing to network, regardless of what industry you're in or the people you deal with. I think it's important because you just don't know where life leads you. And, as you were mentioning before, when I was going through that journey of trying to understand, I was doing my due diligence. It's not just a case of a decision where you pack up and you go because, you like the idea of living overseas. You really got to think about what you're doing, because you do leave a lot behind. And, little things like, for example, at times every time I see my parents now, my parents come and visit us at least sort of once a year, or we're back in Oz. But, you lose that time. This is time you're going to lose with family and friends. So you really need to think about it. And I see them get older, and it's really difficult for me. I can tell you, for both myself and my wife, when she sees her parents as well. So, they're the sorts of things that you're giving up. So the offset of that is that you really got to make sure that you're, this is for you, and do your due diligence. And when I say do your due diligence, network, speak to people that have been overseas, that have had a great experience, but also the ones that haven't had a great experience. And that's why, I spent a lot of time to understand why, what was the main issue. So to be honest with you, Gary, by the time I got to Singapore, or by the time we'd moved the family, I everything that I had been told, you could see it play out. And I think that was the most important thing. The second thing is, curiosity. Stay curious. Ask questions. Go around like this. It doesn't take a lot to ask. You can start by asking how someone's day is, and then really get into a level of detail that you want to. And there doesn't have to be an agenda behind it. I think this is the thing I keep telling people. There doesn't have to be an agenda behind it, but you'll learn something. At the end of the day. And I've learned, and I've seen this, just to give you, sorry, I know we're going to finish up shortly, but just to give you some perspective, wherever you go, you're going to find differences and nuances in that particular country or culture. So I'll give you an example. I'm working in Singapore, where everything is black and white. Everything's transactional. A lot of I found it really difficult coming from Australia. So when you're in Australia, you're in a meeting, what's the first thing you do? You get up in that meeting and say, your football team won, or, how was your weekend, or that's a small talk. When you're in Singapore, it's very much the opposite. You're walking in, what's the agenda? What are we going to do? What are you aiming to achieve? So very, very transactional. So I've gone from that, having sort of 7.5 years of sort of being conditioned to that, then coming to a place like the UAE and Dubai, where everything is relationship based. I got told I had to slow down. I got told, sit down, George, have a coffee. Well, we don't have time for a coffee. We've got to do that. No, sit down, take it easy. It'll happen. Inshallah, that's a big thing here. So inshallah, it'll happen. And you had to change the way you tackle things. And sorry, going back to bring it back to the subject. around networking, I cannot stress enough the amount that you should spend in trying to build relationships and build your network as well. I can't stress it enough, guys.
Oh yeah, look, great advice. Staying curious, investing in your relationships, slowing down,
Yeah.
adjusting to cultures when you have to, because that's exactly, you got to understand the rules. So yeah, Australia's different to Singapore, which is different to the UAE. You got to adjust. Like you said, you with your networking, you listen to the good and the bad, which and then enabled you to know what the signs of the good were, so that when you were living it, you were actually, hey, tick. I knew about this. I knew about this is what to live by. And a key thing that stood out for me in the conversation around that part was, in both instances, you've had tremendous leaders that you've been working with. You've had tremendous people leading you that you've been able to work with, and you've trusted their leadership. And because imagine if that was difficult. So many of those other boxes you're able to tick would have been difficult to tick, I assume. So having faith in that leader, I mean, you talked about at Al Hilal, you've got a visionary leader that you've been able to go along for the ride and make things happen that have brought a vision to life, and how amazing that is. You did the same thing in Singapore. When you launched the bank to 1 million new customers in India. I mean, having Sachin Tendulkar there as well, it's just extraordinary, George. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been great to reconnect with you and for us to stay connected for all these years. I want to thank you for sharing a very small part, really, of your story. There's so much more to be told. I think there's a book in you, which brings me to the fact that just today I actually announced the book cover for my next book called Yes for Success, How to Achieve Life Harmony and Fulfillment. And a big part of that is about the sorts of things you were talking about, the questions you had to answer, the decisions you had to make about leaving your family and going into Singapore for 2 years to trial out first, and then sitting down with your family, making the whole decision to move there. I mean, your daughter's photograph saying, hey, I'm going to be okay there. All of that stuff is part of what Yes for Success is about, as is your decision last year to get into a boxing match. And the like, knowing you, that wasn't such a surprise to me, but the way you shared that journey online with us about what you were doing, having done it before myself, and not that many people really done it, there's nothing more raw really than when that first bell goes ding. So yeah, just a quick minute on that experience, George.
Yeah, look, guys, it was as you said, it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in my life. And I mean, you probably know me. I was a bit of a hothead when we were back in the old days. So to use that in a way that that I'm using it for the right reasons for me was an amazing thing. So just a little bit around that. I was a member of a boxing club back in Singapore, so I had some spare time without the family around in my first couple of years, and I joined a gym there called Spartan's Boxing Gym, and I became great friends with a guy by the name of Russell Harrison, who's one of the co-founders of that gym. And anyway, I just kept on boxing, and then when we were moving here, we had the opportunity to invest in the franchise here. So I decided to do that, and then part of us sort of building some momentum for the gym, we put some white collar fights on. And for me, at the end of the day, as you said, you've done it before. The experience was phenomenal, from training camp to going through interviews and so forth. And look, that was all great, and the fight itself was just amazing. I absolutely loved every minute of it. But for me, the most important thing was that we lost a really good friend, very close friend of ours in Singapore, and the fact that we're able to raise some money for her. She was very close to my wife, and her husband's like a brother to me. That to me was the most important part of it. So when I reflect on it, I don't reflect so much on the fight itself. I reflect on the fact that I was able to bring him some enjoyment. He can come and see me get my head smashed in a little bit and have a bit of a laugh through the process. But we were doing something, for the greater good. But yeah, no, thanks, Gaz, and thank you for supporting me during it. I know I had a lot of support from people back home, including yourself.
Yeah, and look, again, higher purpose. That's right throughout this journey. There's been a higher purpose there. Right from the upbringing that your wonderful parents instilled in you with their work ethic and the support they gave you to be able to become the man that you are today, George, and the work that you did with your boxing training, again, for that higher purpose of raising some money for a close friend whose husband, unfortunately, was no longer there for you, is just an extraordinary thing to do. And that's just consistent. I mean, that's one of the things I talk about in Yes for Success, George, is we're one person. Yeah, we've got lots of different life roles, but let's be consistent with who we are. Of course, you engage with your parents different than you do with your best friend, as you do with your children, as you do with your wife, etc., in your case and my case. But we're still the one person. We can still be the same authentic person in all those different roles, just as you were in Singapore and just as you are in Dubai. George, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for agreeing to get interviewed tonight. And I'd like to say thank you, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Gary, absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it. And all the best with your new book as well.
Okay, thanks. We'll let you know about it. So once again, folks, This is Gary Ryan from the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. It's been an absolute delight to have George Harrak here with us today for our interview and this current episode. Keep your eye out for my new book, Yes for Success, How to Achieve Life Harmony and Fulfillment. It's coming out very soon. There's a very special opportunity that will be coming with that when it gets released in the coming weeks. If you'd like to like and subscribe, please do so to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. And if you'd like to be part of my email list, please go to orgsthatmatter.com/newsletter. Once again, this is Gary Ryan and George Harrak, and we look forward to working with you next time.
Thanks, Gary.